welcome everyone to the next instalment of the GigCX Decoded podcast, and I'm broadcasting today from a new location, which is my mum's podcast studio, which has been specially put up just for me, but hopefully the audio will still be good. So this is the podcast where we get to explore a bit more about this wonderful world of GigCX and go into more detailed depths and get other perspectives on the show. I'm your host. I'm Chris Dumpleton, and I've got the pleasure of running the sales marketing ship here at the good ship Limitless. Today we've got a slight change as well. Last time we had one of our customers. This time we thought we'd keep it even closer to the family, and we'd bring on one of our staff members. Not just any staff member. We've got Iain on. So Iain Regan, say hi. Lovely to have you on the show.
Morning, everyone. Morning. Hello, everyone. Hello.
Here we go. Morning, afternoon. So where are you coming from today?
I'm in a hotel room in Seattle currently.
So proper glamorous locations that we are.
Weather's as bad as the UK.
And let's do some weather chat. So it's now raining and windy right now. And what have you got?
It's almost the same here as well. That's why I've got the blind shut, because it's horrible out there.
Oh, I love the weather chat. It's just one of those stalwarts of English chit chat, isn't it? There we go. So we are I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. And the reason why we're bringing you on, Iain, as opposed to anyone else, is that you've just joined Limitless a couple of months ago, which is a great time to ask you some of the killer questions, because you come in and had the whole crikey, this is what GigCX is all about, and this is what our customers are saying. But before we do that, just want to explain, who you are, what you do here, and also if we can ask you a couple of questions about your experience as well to set the scene.
Yeah, I thought I was coming on here for my looks and sparkling personality, but I'll try and give you some content to back that up. Iain Regan. I joined Limitless start of September this year as Chief Customer Officer. So what does that mean? It means I'm Robin to Chris's Batman. He's out there, getting those new customers. He's out there, winning them and convincing them on the value and the benefit of GigCX, which he and his team have done so fantastically over the last few years. Those customers then come into my area of the business. We're a customer success function, so we're here to make sure not only customers, adopt the service initially and realize value from it, and it ticks their business cases and delivers what they expected to deliver, but also the fact that we can improve, provide insight and innovate on an ongoing basis as well. We develop what is from typically a vendor relationship initially, testing something out, seeing how GigCX with Limitless works, through to something that's more strategic, something that's more impactful for both organizations, and ultimately allows both businesses and the people within those businesses to be bathed in the glow of success around the partnership.
Well, there we go. Well, that's really. And tell us about your history. So I don't think this is your first ever job, right? I think you've done other jobs.
I do look that young, Chris. Thanks for saying. I did want to just call that out straight out of college. No, a few miles on the clock, so to speak. And I, unlike lots of people in industry, didn't have a wonderful planned career. I left university without a clue of what to do. And I went to university in a town that had a big call center, and I went and worked there, mainly initially to get some money. But then I sort of saw an industry that this is mid-90s, I thought was going places. The traditional way of delivering service was changing. You had those very early adopters around sort of, telephone service. And I saw the importance. I also saw the fact that as businesses were scaling and their service operations were scaling, they couldn't do all that themselves. So, sort of outsourcers and BPOs and partners were always going to play an ever increasingly important role from a cost, flexibility, innovation, sort of operating model perspective. Worked for a large American outsourcer for about 5 years, did a bit of consulting. And then I spent 12 years sort of riding the wave of offshoring. So all those sort of headlines in the early noughties about jobs going to India, that was me. Sorry, governor. And work with lots of big businesses as they start to what is now, gone away from sort of, white right-wing tabloid rhetoric about job losses to, businesses that now realize, the world's a global economy. You've got global operating models, you've got skills and capabilities in lots of different regions, and you need to be able to leverage those. So spent 12 years helping build a business. It was about $8 million when I started. I left when it was about $500 million, and was sort of successful in doing that. I then sort of took a bit of a segue out of CX for the last 7 years, and I worked for a SaaS-based payment security business. and still sort of with a foot in the contact center world,
yeah.
but actually working through channel partners. And working into a lot of the big CCaaS providers, the Genesis's, the Avayas, Mitels of this world, etc., and a lot of their reseller community, where I first came across a young Chris Dumpleton many years ago. And that's given me a different perspective. It's given me an understanding of the technology layer. It's given me an understanding of what sort of AI, the role AI is playing, the role, automation tools are playing, the role that the general move to cloud is playing in the whole, CCaaS and CX delivery model of the 21st century. And got to a point after selling that business where was looking for the next adventure. Knew you what a great guy you were and how wonderful you were at what you did, as well as obviously knowing our founders well over a number of years, as well as sort of key board members. And it just felt like a business that was going places, a disruptive model in an industry that I think needs some disruption. Yeah. And felt like an opportunity for me to come in and join and make an impact, hopefully.
There you go. Well, you've been welcomed with open arms, hopefully. So, well, there's a great coverage, really, because your first ever job was in a contact center. So there was young Iain with his headphones on.
Yeah.
Then you moved into the world of contact centers and then did all of the offshoring and outsourcing, then into technology, still involved in it. So you've had three different perspectives over it, and that's the thing I love about this industry is everyone can relate to it. Because we're all customers of brands, so everyone gets the things that we're trying to do, genuinely, because we can all appreciate it from our own perspectives as well. And I don't know about you, it's one of those things when you're in this world and then you encounter bad customer service or bad technology and stuff, it just infuriates you, doesn't it? You think, why do they still do that in this world? And I'm often saying phrases like that. But anyway, so there we go. So there's your background, fantastic, and it's absolutely great to have you on the ship as well. So so first question really is about and this is a good time. In fact, I've got two questions for you. The first one is what do you see are the big challenges in the customer experience industry right now? And then the second one, which is teed up nicely, is how do you think GigCX plays a role within that, based upon your now massive experience of 2 months in, and how are you seeing it?
Expert,
yeah,
no problem. I mean, growing up in the Northeast as a kid, I used to have a very fast, impenetrable accent. I've now just got a very fast accent. I think it's slightly more.
I tell you from the north.
Slightly more penetrable, sort of slightly more understandable than perhaps when I was 18 and initially leaving Newcastle. I mean, my view on it is I think the CX industry and the challenge it is facing now are broadly the same challenges that it faced 25 years ago. Right. I'd love to say things have radically changed. I think things have got a lot more complex. Technology, the tools that are available. But if I look at the fundamental problem around the fact that we are still broadly taking a young workforce into a complex, highly metricized environment, asking them to work not particularly palatable hours. And offshore, lots of colleagues and lots of ex-colleagues and friends in different locations have had to work night shifts, their careers, and all of this sort of stuff has an impact. And if what does that lead to? It leads to burnout. It leads to attrition. Things like mental health. Finally getting the sort of the headlines they need, because people recognize, you go and do a job to pay your house and family and everything else and your lifestyle, but that can't be to the detriment of who you are as a person and what you believe in and what you stand for, and ultimately your sort of health and well-being. So I think a lot of the fundamentals of the industry are still the same. I think, interestingly, COVID has been a bit of an enabler for the CX industry. If you look at what happened over the last 10, 15 years, there's lots of people out there talking about work at home models, that WAHA model. I think it gained some traction in the US just because of the sheer geographical distances. But if you look at UK, Europe, sort of the Asian hotspots like India and the Philippines, even places like South Africa and a lot of the emerging sort of African CX sort of locations, they were still very much bricks and mortar shops. And I think what COVID did, whilst no one wanted it and it had a horrible impact on lots of people's lives, what it has done from a business perspective is it's, I think, demonstrated the fact that there's a different way of working. And I think that has absolutely, if you read a lot of the reports, a lot of the sort of big BPOs pump out about, what a great job they're doing and how sort of friendly and employee focused they are, etc. As these gigantic organizations that sort of employ hundreds of thousands of people, but a lot of the feedback they're getting and a lot of the reports I've seen of saying people want to work from home, people enjoy the flexibility. I mean, it fundamentally helps in the CX environment. The classic peak of a peak in the morning when people used to open their letters. I think my letters come like mid-afternoon now if they ever arrive. And then sort of when people get back from work in the evening as well, staffing those peaks is almost impossible. And hence you get the whole, we're experiencing terribly high call volumes, which, by the way, I only ever seem to hear on every IVR or ever contact nowadays as a business. I mean, it's endemic across the industry. And I will come on to that a little later, as it's a bit of a bugbear of mine. And I look at that, and the industry's evolved hugely, but a lot of the problems the industry had are still absolutely front and center of the problems the industry has today. There's just a truckload more complexity. In addition, a lot of the perhaps retail outlets that customers may have historically gone to get resolution, they've disappeared. I mean, the high street's been a bloodbath, as everyone knows. So the contact center, the CX environment, that really is the window for the brand, and it is often where most organizations only ever speak to their customers in that way nowadays. Obviously, they'll do the usual marketing broadcast messaging that we all get bombarded with. But often the only type of truly personalized experience they get is in that CX environment. And there's a proliferation of channels, platforms, tools, AI tools in front of the agent, AI tools behind the agent, but still, everyone maniacally focused on outcomes, customers diving between channels to try and get resolution quicker, always while volumes, continue from what I can see to increase. I think as much as any business automates, they throw additional complexity into the hopper with the new stuff they're launching and the new marketing activity they're doing. So from that perspective, I see a lot of the fundamental challenges and headwinds, some tailwinds the industry has as well, as being pretty consistent in what I've seen over the last 25 years. And that's why I think things like Limitless and things like GigCX and a fundamentally different operating model that provides true flexibility really does allow people to be masters of their own destiny, come in and come out when they want to, and supplement income or work around, sort of other things they have going on in their lives. That for me is, I think, the game changer. And that's why Limitless is an interesting business for me. And that's why the whole model for me has a fundamental capability to supplement and start to really shift how CX is delivered in the modern age.
Yeah, so there's some great stuff in there around firstly, I completely agree. COVID is, whilst it was a massive,
no one enjoyed it. We all hated it. Yeah,
it was a big circuit breaker for society as well as for a lot of these things. And then first, I've never heard of Waha model. That's the first time I've ever heard that phraseology used.
Waha's been around for a while.
I'll adopt that one. It makes me sound cool. So I've always talked about this thing where historically you got the people and you brought them to work. Yeah. And then with the advent of Waha models, you could then take the work to the people because you can broadcast the work out. But I think GigCX goes that next step on, which is, okay, you now, so stage one, bring the people to the work and work them really hard. Stage two, take the work to the people by allowing them to work from home, but they still have to work in a very similar way. Gig is take the work to people and allow them to work when they want to work.
Yeah.
And that's the next evolution of this whole model. And that's the one where you see brains exploding because people that have been in this industry for 30, 40 years, it's always ever been the same sort of thing. Whether the bricks and mortars are physical or they're virtual, there's still the same concepts around it. Allowing people to come in and go as they please is an area where, because the contact center world was so, like you say, metricized, and it was so rigid and focused on outcomes because the economics don't allow for fat. they don't allow for an abundance of staff when you don't need them, because contact centres, let's face it, are cost centres. They're there to mop up contacts that ideally wouldn't ever arise, but they have to arise because there's people have been selling things. So they typically get given a budget on the basis of what's been sold. So dealing with it as efficiently as possible makes sense. But what that creates is that environment where you want people to be as optimized as possible, and we all know that the issues that that's created. The gig just changes all of that, and it allows this sort of ability for people to come and go as you please, and like you said, which is they can either top up an income, or they can fit it around their other priorities in life, and that's the game changer, because that is the thing that changes the whole previous model, puts on its head.
Yeah, and I still see the industry chasing its tail. It's constantly, losing people from the bottom of the funnel because they're burnt out and tired and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure the advent of working from home has probably brought attrition rates down a bit. But still, as that employee of that business, you're still in a position where, those expectations are there. You're there to do a job. As we all know, we're all employed. We all have objectives and targets and all those sort of things. And I mean, that's a tough thing to get your head around when you're at a sort of certain stage of your career. As I said, particularly if you're working horribly unpalatable hours and it's impacting your social life and everything else you've got to do. I'm sure those sort of attrition levels have dropped, but all the big BPOs still report crazy numbers, and you wonder why they struggle to get consistency of experience, because as you said, they're run as very tight operations, and that's customers getting very sophisticated in how they source. But for me, there's a few things here around the sort of gig economy, and I know it gets battered, because of the perceptions around Uber. I mean, there's still a lot of people out there driving for Uber and Bolt and Lyft and all that sort of stuff, and I don't think anyone's forcing them to do it. They clearly make a good salary, it's flexible, and all that sort of stuff. And if I look at what we enable people to do, is we enable them to manage their own health, their own well-being. We allow them to dive in there. We allow them to do what they want to do, work as hard as they want to work, and then naturally, make their own choice around when they want to disengage. And it's about empowering people, in my opinion, and it's about putting control back in, an employee's hands rather than the sort of faceless corporate conglomerate. And I think from that perspective, that's really where we know, and we can make sure that people are able to step back when they feel too busy or stressed, or they've worked too hard, and it gives them the opportunity to do that. I think the sort of other side of it, from sort of our perspective, is we're able to allow people, if they want to work longer, they can work longer. I've certainly done 10-hour shifts before and that sort of stuff, because I've felt fine, I've been able to do it, and I want to get some money in, and we give people the capability to do that. Sometimes that flexibility just isn't in a model where you've got a much sort of more fixed sort of staffing roster. You've got the ability to go up a bit and down a bit, but you've got a group of people to keep happy, etc. I mean, we're very fortunate with a great customer base where we've got the work to spread out across people, and make sure people are engaged but can dive in and dive out when they want to, whether it's economically driven or for personal reasons.
Do you on that? Do you think there's still? You mentioned about the people's understanding of Uber and Bolt and Lyft. Do you think there's still do you think there is a stigma associated with the word GigCX? That's what we use to describe what we do.
I think there's probably a stigma associated with the gig economy. I wouldn't say GigCX, just because we've got people who work for us that are delivering fantastic customer outcomes and doing it on a beach. And they can do that. Connectivity, they're handling digital, they've got the right technical skills, that they can go and do that. It's fine for us, it's fine for the customer. It's all about outcome, and so that's the way we back ourselves as a business as well. I think it's a little different to industries where, as part of that gig work, you've got to go to a physical location, perhaps in the catering or hospitality world, 0 hours contract type stuff, or maybe when you're obviously having to drive, and you can't go and drive and be sat by the beach the whole time, or in the countryside, you're typically in a city centre and everything else. And that's when I think we just need to be conscious around what we're doing in the CX landscape, the CX world, and the opportunities that that's creating for people. And maybe, you know, it's got all the flexibility, the benefits, the things that people are looking for, but perhaps some of the things that some people out there in society might associate with gig work, that doesn't necessarily, you know, come part and parcel of GigCX. Because, you know, we've got the capability to deploy remotely. We've got the capability for people to work whenever they want to work, because of the world of, you know, fantastic world of connectivity and platforms these days. And that's the bit where I think we need to continue just to educate the market. I wouldn't say consumers necessarily, but I think certainly the market, customers, you know, influencers out there in the market about the model and why perhaps the word gig is, you know, got slightly different connotations than you might anticipate and think about when you're talking about ride sharing apps and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the for me, the gig has people's brains go to one area. Everyone, because nobody listened to this or in the modern world won't have had some engagement with.
It'll all be changed after this podcast, though, Chris. It'll all be sorted, yeah.
Of course, yeah. We'd have clarified the big stuff, but whether they've stayed in an Airbnb or they've had a ride share or they've had food delivered or, well, you know, whatever it was, you know, so everyone's got a relationship, everyone's a customer, everyone's got some form of relationship with it, but there is obviously a lot of press around how, frankly, all different models have been abused over time. You know, fixed models, outsourcing models, work at home models. There was always people or companies that will try and push the boundaries to certain areas, and some gig companies out there saw it as a way to get effectively people working full time without having to pay the additional on costs and stuff like that. Now, so that we would call that bad gig, right? That's just abuse of the system, and that's why we created our good gig thing. But that's for another topic. We're not here to sell our good gig marketing brochure just yet. Anyway, maybe that's a topic for the next one.
I think the bit for me in the CX industry is about flexibility, because, you know, you get to a certain point in life, you've done all right. Yeah, you know, you pay for your bank account. You've been a customer of your cable TV provider for X number of years, and they tell you you're a platinum customer. When I do need to call them, I'm still sitting waiting. I will not name the bank I am with, but they have had system problems for the last 5 years, from what I can tell, because their front-end IVR constantly says we've got experiencing system problems and unseasonably high call volume. I mean, at what point does unseasonably high call volume become the norm?
Yeah.
You know, when it's been like that for 6, 12, 18, 24 months. Because, you know, for me, you know, it's a front-end throwaway that people, I'd say, lazily put on IVRs to say, I'm really terribly sorry. And, you know, and then be nice to our staff. You know, be kind to them. Well, I always am, always with contact center agents, because I've done that myself and I know what a hard job it can be. I'm always, you know, polite and, you know, respectful, and, you know, make sure I give them back what they're giving me. I just sort of question sometimes, you know, it's easy for a business to say, be nice to your customers, be nice to the employees. The best way to do that would be make sure you've got enough staff and enough flexibility in your operating model, so customers aren't having to wait 45 minutes, an hour to speak to someone. You know, you have other channels, you have other capabilities, you have easy, intuitive ways. You know, whether it's simple stuff like, you know, the wait's 45 minutes. Do you want us to call you back? Yes, please. Thanks very much. We'll call you back in 45 minutes. Happy days, no problem at all. When I sit on an IVR and say it's a 45-minute wait, and I'm sitting there going, I've now got to wait 45 minutes. By the time I finish that 45 minutes, I am not in a mood to chit chat. I'm not in a mood to be nice to people. And that for me is where gig comes in, around really leveraging that global model, really providing flexibility and helping organizations sort of future-proof themselves and just get away from that brand impacting rhetoric and perception that you're implanting in customers' heads when they contact you about the fact that, oh, goodness me, isn't it always painful?
And the flexibility that comes with it, as you mentioned, which is, you know, if we continue, so often, you know, we use different ways to describe what our market is and what it does, but Uber is a great way to describe actually how flexible it works within a contact center environment. So, you know, the analogy or comparison there is that in an old world, you would have taxi drivers who are on a salary, and you say that we need let's say it's Heathrow Airport, right? We say, right, there's 100 flights coming in over the next 2 hours.
Yeah.
So we need 30 of you to work that shift, and your salary, go and do it. And then there's 500 flights coming because some have been diverted, or 100 only turn up because some of those have been diverted. And then you've got too many drivers or not enough drivers. And then the two things get affected: either the bottom line, people are spending too much money, or customer service, and people have to wait too long to get in a taxi. And that, I often use this phrase because I get personally frustrated with technology and things that don't work properly, right? And I have this phrase at the moment. I use it a lot at the moment, which is, I was looking. So we've just managed to, using this James Webb Telescope, we've been able to capture images that happened 6.2 billion light years ago. We've been able to, we've looked back into distance 6.2 billion light years ago. But I can't get through to a contact center within half an hour. Like, how does that work?
There's definitely something wrong there. There's definitely something wrong.
There's something wrong there. Now, of course, you're not using those people who are making the telescope to do this stuff, but just the principle of how, these things, there's massive advancements in some areas, but sometimes it's the most basic things that can cause the most angst around people. And
the key here as well, because it's not only does it impact your brand, because I haven't got a good word to say for my bank, and I've been with them years.
Yeah.
And, I supposedly I'm a premier customer and all that sort of stuff, and I pay for it. And the team I speak to are brilliant. Their infrastructure, their systems, the capability they have to handle demand at certain times is just fundamentally lacking. And for me, that inherently drives my opinion of that brand and that organization. And I'm sure it does lots of other consumers, because I don't think I'm unusual. I'm not particularly, I'd like to think I'm sort of down the middle in most things, down the middle politically, down the middle in sort of socially, all that sort of stuff. Just not saying I'm a lib dem.
On the golf course.
Not on the golf course, the opposite on the golf course. but more about the fact that, the extremities of life are always something that causes problems for society generally. And we've got to try and, build bipartisanship. We've got to try and work together. We've got to try and come together as a society. I always sort of jokingly reference, what Earth needs is actually an alien attack, because it's probably the thing that would bring us together, and stop us bickering like kids between different nations and stuff. God forbid it never happens. But, it's one of those things where sometimes you need that unifying force, because then you sort of stop worrying about the rubbish you're dealing with day to day, and you start thinking about the bigger picture. And don't want to sort of get too highfalutin about things, but that model about when I contact an organization and that experience, just they're just fundamentally letting their employees down, all right, because they're not setting them up for success. And hey, guess what? You can only let your employees down so long before they say thanks very much, I'm going to go somewhere else. And that, then it becomes this virtuous circle where the business, every CX operation globally, just constantly chases their tail, and it's just constantly, throw stuff in the top end because stuff's flying out the bottom end because the middle just is never quite right. And that's the bit for me where I'm not trying to present us as the silver bullet, the panacea to all these ills. But, what we and businesses like ours can do is provide that flexibility, using our global crowd, and we are a truly global business across 40, 50 countries now. We've got the capability to really help businesses when those pinch points come, but do it in a super flexible up and down way that they can't physically do with a lot of their traditional sort of CX partners.
So what advice, so bear in mind, we don't want to make this a sales pitch, but with your experience,
not very good at selling, Chris, as you know.
Well, you've got a job here. You talk. How would you encourage somebody, to think about this? What advice would you give them to, internally, in order to think about GigCX as a viable model for their business? So come up, maybe answer that from your experience from, being, first ever job, little Iain running into a contact center with his headset on, and then the years you spent in the outsourcing world. Come at it from that perspective. How would you advise someone? How would you kind of articulate it and give them some encouragement to do it?
Yeah, and I'd say as I ran into that contact center with my ponytail swinging.
Did you have a ponytail?
Did have a ponytail, yeah. there's one or two colleagues I'm still linked in with who remember those days as well. So hopefully they won't comment. I certainly did. If I look at the first thing I'd say is I think lots of industries globally are like a pyramid, and what the sort of the big guys at the top, those big global sort of industry behemoths, whether it's in the tech space or other industries, what they do tend to feel always, whether it's technology adoption, innovation, tools, approaches, that always filters down into the mid-market and the enterprise market. It then filters down eventually into the SME market many years later. It was those sort of big guys, the big banks, insurers, and tech companies that started this contact center model. Who doesn't have that now? Even down to small businesses that will have 2 or 3 guys or girls, sitting with the capability to take inbound customer calls, and it'll be a contact center of sort. So the first thing I'd say is those businesses that typically lead and are very, very successful, very, very sort of famous across the globe, they're doing it. All right, that's the first thing I'd say.
Have you got any examples of what companies might be doing that, Iain?
Can I name them? Is it okay to name them? I mean, if I look at the likes of Microsoft are doing, eBay, PlayStation, people like Dell and Samsung and HP and these sort of customers, as well as some of the big FMCG organizations like L'Oreal and Unilever, all of them have got GigCX, with us, thankfully, but there are others out there doing it with other people, less well, and those guys are doing it because they see the inherent advantages it brings to their operating model. It sees the fact that it allows them flexibility, allows them to tap into a truly global talent pool. It allows them to flex up and flex down, intra-hour, intra-day, intra-week, month, whatever time frame they're looking at. So that's the first thing I'd say. And I think we often look at those organizations that really do innovate, sort of globally succeed as the organizations that lead the pack in the way, operating models look and feel. They typically also got lots of expensive consultants who work for them as well, who help advise them. So it's almost like looking at those sort of guys. You've got the ability to tap into their experience, the direction they're taking the market, and the probably expensive advice they've had in what that future CX operating model looks like. And you can almost grab that for free and say, let's have a look at it. I think it's also super easy to test. I think the way we've set the business up and is the fact that you can go deeply integrated, and all that sort of stuff that involves tech work on both sides and everything else. You can also put it completely standalone. We've got big customers that are doing that. And it allows them to go and test something in a really controlled environment really quickly. Our model of live in 5, says it all. That's not 5 years or 5 months, or it's about a few weeks to get them up and running, and that says everything about the speed that you can operate at. And then it's really easy to incrementally grow that as you start looking at customer intents and those intents that best fit this sort of model. So it's not something where perhaps historically with outsourcing, you've got to go, right, I need to go and find 500 FTEs of work and put it out through tender and all that sort of stuff. You don't need to do that. You can carve out little segments of activity and very quickly see, realize, and demonstrate the value of what we do and GigCX and that sort of flexible sort of expert community that we can draw on, and it allows you then to build business cases as a stakeholder in an enterprise or a mid-market organization, and very clearly show tangible commercial and operational benefits of implementing this type of model. So just say it's super easy to consume and look at, and that's the bit that I think sometimes perhaps people have a view of it's going to be big, complex, long. I've got to go and find a chunk of work. I've got to go and pull it from an in-house or another vendor. Don't need to do any of that. You might want to do that over time when we demonstrate the credibility and capability we've got, but short term, it's something you can go and take a bite of really quickly and easily.
Yeah, I like the so fundamentally because the GigCX model removes the sunken costs to do with time when people aren't productive, management, IT, infrastructure, buildings, training, and all those are costs that have to get rolled up into
CX Cloud. CX Cloud in its absolute purest form.
So our model is cheaper because you remove all those things. But frankly, a little piece of me dies whenever I hear it's just because it's a cheaper model. Because if it was just a race to how to make things cheaper, then we're on the same set of train tracks as those organizations that are trying to push all of their contacts into lower cost labor markets or trying to automate everything. It by design creates something that's cheaper, but not because we're trying to race to the bottom. It's because you remove all of the things that don't need to get charged for.
Yeah.
But the two things it does provide, which is where people should get excited, in my humble opinion, is firstly the flexibility, like you mentioned, which is that innate ability, if I go back to my Uber analogy, to be able to allow flights to come into Heathrow and then being diverted from another airport, or for them not to come in there, and you don't have to change anything, because that set of Uber drivers in our world, gig experts, are able to turn up to do the work or not turn up to do the work, and nobody gets penalized, and nobody has any issues with doing that. That you can't do in a rigid model, whether that rigid model is in-house or outsourced. It's still a rigid model. It's still got those hours that people need to work. So that in its own creates something that ultimately will benefit customers. If whatever happens, COVID was a great example where all of a sudden there's a massive influx, and you're not then having to program your IVRs to automatically say, we're really busy right now. I've had that message for 5 years, that stuff. So flexibility. The other one is where I'm curious to continue to explore, is whether the benefit of this actually sits outside of the contact center operation. And it's sometimes this thing that feels a bit like you can't touch it. It's a bit like a mist, which is around brand loyalty and customer advocacy.
Yeah.
Because you can't metricize that, not easily. It's something you'd have to measure over a long period of time to say over a huge test. It's one of those things where you got two sets of people, and we said we fed this one, we fed this one, over like 2 years we managed to this person had this health benefit, this one didn't. It's one of those things that's so hard to tangibilize, but it instinctively feels a better thing to do. And everybody can relate to this because we're all customers of brands. And the killer question is, would you rather talk to someone who's got your product, or would you rather talk to someone that doesn't have your product? And as long as they're able to provide the same level of customer service standard, i.e. the pleasantries and this following a guideline, and being able to ask them if they've answered your question, what you get on top is the answer to that problem, which is businesses spend gazillions on marketing, which is to bring new customers in and to advertise new products. But it's very hard to demonstrate how many of them are actually coming in by virtue of all of those different advertising, whether it's a bus or a billboard or a TV advert or whatever it might be. But when you can actively say, well, you can put some substance behind this phrase. Because I hear this phrase all the time, which is, we put our customers at the heart of everything we do, and there's normally a full stop. Yeah. And then you try and contact the contact center, or you try and do something. It's just innately difficult. You have problems in the way and that stuff. So, from a rather than this being from a contact center customer service perspective, is this coming from the marketing team, which is we are bringing on our own customers, facilitated by our customer service teams, to help our other customers with inquiries, and that does a brilliant thing for us, because it's getting our customers talking to our customers, but that's going to create more loyalty. Those customers are far less likely to leave us. They're far more likely to talk to their friends and family about us. So you get that whole the brand advocacy thing, and you can actually say, oh, it feels, not only does it feel instinctively right, but you can put some facts and figures behind it. So I think so from what you picked up is flexibility, absolutely, the CSAT of cost. But do you think there's also something there, which is, if we're giving somebody advice on how to think about this in a model, is to involve the part of the business that's responsible for the acquisition of new customers and the retention of existing ones.
So a 10,000 million%. I mean,
That's quite high.
yeah, it's quite a lot. I'm quite strong on that one. I don't want to sit on the fence here. All right, I'm going to come out either way.
You said you're straight down the middle, but
I'm actually left to right. Taking my golfing analogy there. Chris, I agree, just because I see the people who work in our crowds for our customers, and they are experts. They are passionate about the brand. They, have an inherent intrinsic emotional connection to the organization and its products. I mean, that's probably most, ably typified by, the relationship lots of people have got with Apple devices, because of the sort of role it plays in their life. But, people have the same, passion around, PlayStation. I know my 12-year-old son certainly does, around, Microsoft devices and Microsoft infrastructure and operating systems, and you've got people out there who are really engaged and passionate and excited about this type of stuff. And it gives them an opportunity, perhaps historically, where they wouldn't want to necessarily dive into a contact center environment and work in that sort of place, where they can go and pick and choose what they do and how they do it. And if I look at, I think every marketing team in the world is always wrestling with customer acquisition cost versus lifetime value, and those sort of core metrics that lots of businesses are valued on, and all of those sort of things. And I think any piece of work is cross-functional. I mean, it's ultimately the CX teams that deliver it and own it. But, we work with marketing teams regularly because they've ultimately and often got the capability to go and reach into their communities, into their user bases. And we've had some customers, I think, initially that have said, that's a bit of a scary prospect, going to our customers and saying, can you help other customers? And then you see 6 months later, the complete mind shift they've had when they've seen it work, and they've seen those customers that are helping, because for me, it creates a totally different dynamic with the business and its customer. It's no longer one way. This is customer buying off the business. This is business buying off the customer. That's truly symbiotic relationship. It's a little bit like, you're clownfish and you're an enemy. One relies on the other. And that for me, how can that not strengthen relationships? How can that not say, we want to deliver a better customer experience, and we want to do it by using you at times because we think you're brilliant. Our products inside out, you're passionate about them. You've engaged with Limitless to, be part of their global community. That for me feels like a no-brainer. Can I sit and put some hard metrics around how that improves brand advocacy in a year or 2 years' time? I can't. I just can't see how it has the opposite effect. No. I just can't see how, that doesn't have an impact where, you're sitting there saying, this business is actually trying to take its CX seriously by using people that are not they found in the street. Not it's because they're based within a half an hour commuting radius of a particular location. Yep. This is about, I've gone out across the world and found these people in whatever country they're in because they're passionate, they're committed, they're knowledgeable. They've got a mindset of wanting to help, and they also want some flexibility in how they work. That for me says so much about, a brand, and says so much about the way they're trying to operate with their customers. Because what it also does to their traditional contact center estates as well is it takes pressure off those guys as well. So there's lots of wins here, lots of wins. But I mean, fundamentally, I don't think it can have anything but a positive impact on someone's brand perception and their propensity to buy in the future when they see a business that is trying to use their passionate community of existing users to help new people, to help them with their adoption, their user journey, help them when they've got a problem. Surely that's got to be talking about this bipartisan approach to the world of us all coming together to help each other. That for me is a classic example in the CX world.
Well, no surprises. We don't need any convincing of this, but hopefully there's some nuggets in there for people to take away. Some good stuff in there around the kind of what challenges there've been in the industry, and certainly what like you mentioned, when people do this and in 6 months' time their mind just completely shifts, and then it becomes why didn't we do this earlier? But I know we're going to say things like that because we're at the coalface, so to speak. But fascinating chat, Iain. We could go on forever as always, but there's some great stuff there. Hopefully people have got some useful tidbits out of all that. And we'll be back next time with more industry leading perspectives on this world of GigCX, and I'll help the conversation flow. But for now, Iain, thank you for your time. and I'll see you in the office when you're back.
Thanks, guys. All the best.
Cheers.